Hi, everybody. I'm Johnny Kolasinski, and I'm not a doctor. Jackson Vane is a doctor, but he's probably not your doctor. That means that this podcast is not medical advice. If you need medical advice or medical care, please contact a medical professional. And when you do, please tell them to subscribe to Hi, Everybody, a Bad Medicine podcast.
Hi everyone, I'm Jackson Vane.
I'm Johnny Kolasinski. You might remember me from such podcasts as Bortlesbots, Futurism, and the Jacksonville Jaguars.
Oh god, I just got it.
This is Hi Everybody, a Bad Medicine podcast. We talk about the medical errors and sometimes successes in Hollywood's depictions of medical maladies and how the body works.
That is not going to be the case today.
Not the case today. You can find this podcast on Stitcher, iTunes, Libsyn, and wherever fine podcasts are sold. And you can check us out on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at Hi Everybody MD. We do have, once again, a wonderful guest with us this week, Dr. Greg Winters.
Hi,
Dr.
everybody.
Greg Winter, I apologize.
No S.
No S.
So today we're going to be talking about the 2002 James Bond film, Die Another Day. And this one actually made me angry. But that's something we'll touch on when we get to the angry
You are right.
scene.
You are right to be angry.
Oh man, this was all your idea, wasn't it, Greg?
It was. I was watching this movie with one of my friends. I was out in Virginia, and it got to the scene of him recovering from being tortured, and I was like, "Oh no, we have to do this movie." Then the movie progressed, and I was like, "We certainly have to do this movie."
Normally I'd open with a synopsis, but the synopsis is this is a James Bond movie, and things happen, and they're awesome, and nothing matters.
No. I think that sums it up pretty well, but you forgot to add in lots of double, triple, and sometimes just straight up single entendres.
Yes.
This is the creepiest I've ever... Well, first off, this is the last Pierce Brosnan Bond movie,
Yep.
and there's good reason.
I'm going to disagree. I love Pierce Brosnan.
I don't know. I feel like he went from suave and debonair to...
Sexual predator.
Guy with a van.
Because he got real creepy with asking, like, Halle Berry's character, Jinx, if, like... They come out at night to drink.
That's not him. That's James Bond.
That is James Bond.
James Bond is from another era, and he's slowly growing up. Daniel Craig is rocking that shit.
Yeah.
I'm excited for the next one. It'll be fine. But the medicine in this shit is garbage.
Yeah. I feel like I needed the anger therapist that the North Korean guy needed in the beginning of this movie after watching this. Because this made me so angry. You'll know why when we get later in it. But I guess we could start with the post-torture recovery scene.
Yeah. So at the beginning of the movie... Bond is captured by the North Koreans, and after an awesome display of hovercrafts, and is tortured for weeks or months.
Yes.
Well, it's
A period of
indeterminate,
time,
long time.
And eventually traded for another hostage. M pulls him out.
Yeah. He looked real good for someone who was tortured for an indeterminate amount of time.
Yeah.
They show him being tortured, and he is clearly being beaten and revived and beaten and revived. And when you see him in recovery in MI6, he basically looks pretty good.
Yeah, except he has a longer beard and shaggier hair.
Time has passed.
Yes.
But somebody had a stylist.
He also still ripped.
He's so
He did a
ripped.
lot of working out.
Yeah.
He's on the cardio torture plan.
Yeah. I mean, they said at some point they scanned him for scorpion venom, which is so specific because I'm pretty sure scorpions don't exist in North Korea. But
I mean, I can't get that specific,
This is
but
not
it's
a bad
like,
entomology
if
podcast.
if they're looking at the things that they report,
yeah.
you can't. I mean, you could tell that he was poisoned with something, but you wouldn't be like scorpion venom. That's a ridiculous.
I
conclusion
actually
to come to.
looked up what the symptoms of scorpion venom were, and it's itchiness, sweating, drooling, nausea, vomiting, high blood pressure, and high heart rate. But his vital signs were pristine.
They were.
Yeah, he was a steady 60 beats per minute.
With a better blood pressure than mine.
And I'm gonna say, Jackson, you fell victim to what most people do when they look something up. what scorpion did you look up, or did you just look up general scorpion?
General scorpion. I did not look
up... Which is not... I mean, every scorpion is not the same. They do different stuff, so you...
Different things. But I also did not look up the most elusive of all scorpions, the North
Korean
scorpion. So that one I did not look up. But he was on monitor. He had a monitor going off, but no, he was not hooked up initially.
Not initially.
Not initially.
I think there's some artistic license that took place there as scenes faded from one to another. But when the monitor became important, they did show that he had things on his body that could potentially be monitoring. He didn't have many wires, but he certainly had sticky things on his body.
I will say the most artistic part of this whole scene was how they drew his heart rate on the EKG tracing.
That is a good point.
Because that is the ugliest tracing of a heart I've ever seen. If you had that, it looked like a preschooler scribbled on the screen for a while, because it did not look like a real heart rate tracing.
I mean, it looked like the idea of someone who had seen a heart tracing before, and the biggest things that you like, hey, this is going to be on the screen, look at these big tracings. The thing that he was missing is the P wave. That's when you get the signal for the top part of your heart to contract. And that's not there, and that would be a big problem. Like, it would mean that his heart's not working very well.
Yeah. There's no conductivity correctly.
There's some odd things that happen in the scene where he's sort of going back in his head, doing PTSD, and slowing down his heart rate, like using that experience to slow down his heart rate to eventually put him in cardiac arrest, and then everyone comes running in to save him. And there's so many things to talk about in that I know that I'm gonna be tangentially pulled as I talk. But, like, that's a thing some people can do. They can slow their heart rate. That's fair. But you can't slow your heart rate to zero. If you slow your heart rate to zero, then you're not pumping any blood or oxygen, which means you're dying for real.
And I think it's also worth noting, if you can slow down your heart rate down to zero, you're not supplying the brain part to make you make the thoughts.
That's the next part.
You can't make thoughts with your brain if there's no blood going to the brain.
If your brain can't work. So there's a weird thing that's happening there, but whatever. So he slows his heart rate down. They come in. They're trying to revive him. They give him a couple breaths. Then they're gonna shock him with the defibrillator. You work in the ER. Yeah. I do not. Talk me through this. What happens?
So this is one of those scenes that made me need the anger therapist real bad. So he flatlined on EKG. And then the hot nurse that he later hits on after he comes back to life, spoiler alert, gives him mouth-to-mouth, gives him 2 rescue breaths. No one's doing CPR or anything at that time. And then one of the doctors just runs in and goes, "Get me atropine quick." That is definitely not the first medication we would use in a code situation.
What is atropine?
Atropine's used in some resuscitations, mainly for kids to prevent them from vagaling and having a slower heart rate. We don't routinely use it in adult codes unless there's other medications on board, like an anticholinergic that might affect it.
So he slowed his heart rate down, and
now
the first move is let's get him the med to slow a heart rate down.
Yeah. Well, not so much slow a heart rate down, but prevent you from triggering a response in your body to slow your heart rate down further. But really, the medication you should be using is epinephrine. If your heart stopped, we've talked about this so many times before, epinephrine's your best friend, and that's the thing that you should be pumping into the body at that point. But it's
don't bump epinephrine.
Correct. Bumping epinephrine, bad. Pumping epinephrine, great. But no one's doing CPR, so it's not getting around. And then they do what everyone loves doing, is shocking people.
Yeah, there's a very important thing. If your heart is not pumping, it doesn't matter what you give somebody. Nothing goes anywhere. You just put medicine in something that isn't moving.
Yeah. And it's that kind of, it won't work. And then his heart rate does come back to like normal-ish. But someone who's about to get shocked and coming back from death, his heart rate goes to a nice, cool 60.
Nice 60. Yeah. Right at 60.
Nice and calm 60. Even though there's a guy over him with paddles, ready to shock him. And then I'm assuming someone gave him atropine, too. So all of that happened. And then they get ready to shock him. And then there's no arc connected.
That is the part where I got that's when I called up that's when I sent Jackson a text saying we need to do this movie. Was James Bond wakes up, he grabs the paddles, hits the 2 people on the side of him, and they both fly backwards because they've been shocked. Except for electricity runs. You need a circuit, and those people are not.
They weren't holding hands.
They
were not holding hands.
There's no reason for that to work. I mean, the electricity used when you use a defibrillator is certainly strong enough to make your body convulse, and if you, I mean, that's why they say clear, so that you're not touching the person.
They also got real aggressive with amping up the voltage. They're like, 200. You know what? 300. Let's just shock them and bring them back to life. Like, they did not even think. They did not give it any time at all.
It was just very much like, oh, you guys missed the basic part of this, which all you have to do is have them all touching each other, and then it works out fine.
Yeah.
But it wouldn't have made a good shot.
Yeah. And then when he comes back to life, normally when people come back from cardiac arrest, they're pretty tired, pretty out of it. Not James Bond. Gets up, walks out of the room, but before he does, still hits on the nurse.
I mean, it's impressive. Think about, like, if you were underwater and you hadn't breathed for a while and nothing has been getting... And then you come, you're like, oh man, I gotta recover. That's the part that's missing from this scene. He just wakes up and is James Bond. But I guess that's why he's James Bond.
Yeah. Up and at him. Very quick.
Up and at them.
Up and at
Up and at them.
And then I think the next scene that made us kind of a little upset was the one punch.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
You forgot about one punch already?
I forgot about one punch already.
So
James Bond has to sneak into a medical facility. So he punches a guy, knocks him out, takes him around in a wheelchair. Over the course of somewhere between 5 minutes and 7 hours.
They went on a boat.
Right, he gets on a boat. I mean, the other part of this is like, you see the successful thing where he punches the guy and then he looks like, oh, he's going to the clinic. I mean, how many rooms did he walk in where he punched a guy and that guy wasn't going to the clinic?
Yeah.
And so there's just a bunch of knocked out dudes in this brothel.
Yeah.
Which is fair. But, like, okay, well, you're just walking into rooms and punching dudes for no reason?
Yeah.
Fair enough.
But he just knocks him out with the magic punch.
This is also an issue with, like, head injuries in movies where, like, if you get hit hard enough in your head to lose consciousness,
you got brain
there
damage.
Are consequences
to
that. It's not like headbutt, I get knocked out for 2 minutes, I'm fine. It's like, oh no, I messed up for a couple of days with not thinking clearly and things don't feel right to me. Also, make sure you don't get hit in the head again. It is a thing that's just ignored in movies. But this guy gets hit in the head once, and he is knocked out for at least hours. And it's like, as a doctor watching that, it is real concerning to see a guy slumped over in a chair after getting hit in the head
This guy could conceivably be dead.
I mean, he's almost certainly dead. Like, that's the problem.
There's no way he's breathing right. If he threw up, he's definitely going to aspirate.
He's going to...
His brain is definitely swelling, or whatever blood is inside of his brain is swelling, too. James Bond just murdered a man and brought him into the clinic. And then my favorite part was he just dumps him. Like, he flings the wheelchair and he falls down. And the first thing a nurse just yells is, "Nobody touch him."
I didn't catch that.
That is my favorite thing to, like, say in the ER. A patient rolls in, like, cardiac arrest. Nobody touch him. Just leave him be.
This guy rolled in here so fast. What happened?
Yeah. That guy was high speed. And then James Bond just walks, like, through, like, 4 patient rooms. But just this one guy is just flung.
There's something to be said for just confidence.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
it's most of what James Bond does.
Also, why did no one on the boat just ask, what's wrong with that dude?
Yeah.
Why is he knocked out for so long? Like, that was a very, very surprising thing. But I would think if the initial blow to his head didn't wake him up, maybe the slamming into the wall might have woken him up, too.
Hopefully.
Yeah.
But what's the real reason this medical facility exists, guys? What are they doing there?
DNA replacement therapy.
That's sort of the best part. I mean,
best, worst.
I like the idea of a clinic that only serves criminals, that none of the, like, secret spy organizations know about. Like, how does this place exist? Yeah. James Bond's like, what? DNA?
They're going in there to do a DNA-ectomy.
Essentially, that is what they're doing. Oh, God. How do I start this?
Well, as the token white guy on this podcast today,
it's a very ethnically
be
diverse
the one to say exactly what they're doing.
I don't think anyone can say what they're doing because
No.
it sort of doesn't make sense. I mean, your DNA is your building blocks for your body and your life. Everyone has DNA. It defines a lot of things about you.
But their goal...
This movie is positing if we erase your DNA and then replace it with someone else's DNA, then you'll be the same mentally but totally different otherwise.
So let me paraphrase what an ethical doctor said. He said, first we're going to wipe out your bone marrow and clean out your DNA. Then we'll steal some DNA from some orphans or whatnot and put it back in and make you a different person. But let me tell you, it's going to be a painful process.
I'm gonna correct you a little bit. He didn't say or whatnot.
That's why I said paraphrasing.
I apologize.
And the goal of this was to turn Korean villain into...
Actually, the goal of this was not spoken.
Okay.
The goal of this was visual, and kudos to the movie. Don't say it.
Yeah.
Show it. And so you see that it's not... It is... Henchman Kao is shown as his original...
Asian self.
Korean self. He's North Korean in the movie. And then it shows his progression as this DNA therapy continues to sort of your basic Hollywood white guy.
Brock Turner.
To be fair,
Okay, I mean, I don't know what else to say.
he hasn't gone there yet, so he's in the middle phase where he's powder.
Yeah.
It's very awkward, and maybe it's helpful to understand our backgrounds a little bit. Jackson is Vietnamese.
Yeah.
I am mixed black and white, and so like there's some racial issues here that I think touch a few buttons about like switching your villains for the first. God forbid you give somebody a speaking part from another background, but then you're gonna switch him to a white guy.
Yeah.
It's just it hits a nerve.
And
It's fine. It works for the movie.
It does.
Except for it doesn't make any...
Any
They don't explain anything about why it's going to happen.
your bone marrow is not the home of DNA. You have DNA
You
everywhere.
have DNA in every cell in your body.
If you've watched SVU one time, you know DNA is in many other places.
DNA is hanging from your ceiling right now.
Yeah. So that's not a good way to change your DNA into something else. But if they were essentially trying to change his face, we watched a better representation of switching faces.
Yeah, this is 8 years post Face Off.
There are way better ways to switch a face. Plastic surgery would be way faster, way cheaper.
But if you don't want a scalpel procedure.
Yeah. Well, that's what the laser's for.
They did hit this. That's
They had a laser fight. We know laser technology works. They just weaponized it for bad. And, like, they did not heal him well enough with the DNA therapy. For some reason, he developed metal and diamonds in his face.
No, I like this movie for the representation of the creation of the Bond villain second. Where this is one of the, like, oh, that guy is named Diamond Face. It's not, but diamonds blow up in his face. Okay, they're stuck in his face. I get that. That makes sense.
it turns him into like the bedazzled version of Pinhead.
And so there's some medicine in here, which is like that stuff doesn't come right out of your face. No. If you are in a car accident or you have if something happens and you get safety glass in your body,
It stays there for a
it
little
stays there. It's your body slowly kicks it out of your skin.
Yeah.
It's creepy.
Also,
This guy is kind of going through the process of it. I like it. It makes sense.
I didn't like how they made his eyes turn blue.
Yes, I agree. There's a huge issue.
Yeah.
There.
I mean, there is a way to... I mean, we do bone marrow therapy with transplants and whatnot, but this is clearly not it. But he does look like a cancer patient.
Yes.
Yeah.
And he should.
He
Because
should.
he is getting his bone marrow wiped out. But also, when you get your bone marrow wiped out, then you sit in a clean room for weeks and weeks while your body recovers so that you don't get whatever illness is around because your bone marrow controls your immune system.
I mean, that's why...
Alternatively, you get in a helicopter and fly to the rest of the movie.
But I was going to ask, how do they measure his cyclosporin levels?
they didn't have that immediately available on screen.
This movie was 8 years after Face Off, and Face Off had more monitoring than this one.
Face Off did establish a better universe than this.
They did. And I think that was kind of just sad.
I mean, James Bond is sort of... it is in the real world, whereas Face Off was just like, no, we're doing whatever we want.
This is the world of John Woo. And...
Which I appreciate. There's pigeons everywhere, and everyone's gonna shoot the entire clip by pulling the trigger once.
So we learn more about what's going on with the villain when he's in the MRI scanner, and James Bond comes and visits him.
Oh, there's so many issues with the scene in the clinic. Mm-hmm. So he's in an MRI scanner, but he's getting blood therapy. There's no reason to be in an MRI is magnetic resonance imaging. It is a way to see different tissues in your body. It's super interesting. I actually talked about this during our Comic-Con panel. Like, this is a thing where if you want to know about crazy science stuff, read how MRIs work. It will blow your mind. It's
spinning
crazy.
Protons and whatnot.
It measures how long it takes for your hydrogen ions to fall back into position, and they emit a radio frequency, and you can measure that and then
they
make it a picture. It's insane. Look at it. It's crazy.
But why is he in the MRI?
There's no reason for him to be imaging. He's getting blood replaced. Who cares?
With also a magical...
They're not imaging his blood
right.
tissue.
Like, that's not how it works.
No. And he had a magical shield over his head that changes colors, too.
He did. I mean, maybe
2002 was the height of LED technology.
It was. And, like, maybe that's what makes the bone marrow in his face speed up?
It's just like everything looks like it's doing something, but it just, if you're getting blood therapy is basically chemotherapy. You're just getting medicine in your veins, and you sit there and you watch TV in the hospital.
Yeah, the bone marrow is...
And no one can come in that room because everyone is covered with bacteria, and you will get sick.
There's a lot of stuff in that room.
Too much crap.
So much stuff in that room. But then, I think it's just funny because he's, like, knocked out completely. I'm assuming he's on, like, heavy sedatives and whatnot to get this very painful, quote-unquote, procedure done. And then James Bond needs to wake him up, and he just, like, taps him gently on the face mask. Doesn't wake up.
That doesn't wake him up, so... No.
He squeezes the IV bag.
It just doesn't mean anything.
And it looked like the worst pain in the entire world. Like, the guy's like, I'm like, no.
Yeah, if you squeeze an IV bag to a rate greater than what your veins can carry, your vein kind of blows, and it doesn't matter. Like,
you got a big
bruise.
Or
the bag pops.
Or the bag pops, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he wouldn't be screaming about it. That's a really weird
But
thing.
also there's the trap there, the air trap thing right below the IV bag. So if you squeeze it really hard, all you're doing is just filling up the air trap part. It's not going to squeeze
it's just like if you force more through there, you can only force in as much as your veins can hold, and then veins blow all the time. That's why IVs need to be replaced. Not a huge deal, not a thing that's going to make you scream.
No.
It's just a ridiculous, like, oh, look, he's waking... Like, it doesn't make any sense. I don't even know how to explain how little sense it makes.
And then he starts battling.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's... I mean, anyone waking up from... Like, he's in a real vulnerable place.
Yeah.
And is immediately at 100% health. Like, this is the annoying second wind boss fight.
He really is, because he's gone. He's in his second form.
I mean, and also he could have just shot. Like, James Bond doesn't need to learn anything from this guy.
No, just
kill him.
Just kill him. That's
Who
fine.
cares?
He has a license to kill.
James Bond literally falls victim to the James Bond trope of, like, I want to talk to him first. Wakes him up, and then the guy gets away.
Yeah, and then they fight, and James Bond has the greatest idea is to take a bottle of some kind of flammable liquid, and the only reason why I know it's flammable is there's a huge flame on it, and throws it at the MRI machine, causing the MRI machine to go on.
Yes, and we all know MRI machines have an emergency on button. Make sure they go on. So I'm going to loop back to my previous statement. MRI machines are insane. You should learn about them. It is a big electromagnet. It turns on, and it makes sure hydrogen ions line up, and then it turns off, and then they fall. Read about it, it's great. But it's an electromagnet, so things that are able to be magnetized can get pulled toward the magnet, and this has caused injury in the real world.
Yeah.
People have actually gotten killed from metal not being cleared from an MRI room, because that is how strong they are. It's not like a little pull, like
it's
oxygen,
not a fridge magnet.
Yeah, it's oxygen bottles have been pulled into them. People
and the only thing that got pulled were like very light loose stuff that went there,
like guns.
So the only thing that got pulled are things that can save James Bond. So basically, anything handheld and dangerous was pulled to the MRI while it was on, except for the small metal bullet he was holding in his hand.
Yeah.
Which would be, that would be the number one thing to be pulled out.
But I think of the things that got pulled in there was a gun, some needles, a handsaw, but not the big old
Jackson, it is
gurney
a
that he was
painful
on.
procedure.
It was a very painful.
You need a handsaw.
You got to get at that bone marrow somehow.
I mean, that is the old way of getting it. You got to saw in and get to that sweet, sweet bone marrow to get it out. But then, like, the gurney he was lying on, which is all metal, didn't go.
Oddly enough, in most hospitals, the gurneys are basically plastic with, like, some metal motorized pieces in it. But that was a metal
That was
gurney.
a full...
That was going in the MRI.
It looked like the kind of table that you would lie on in a morgue that they push into the fridge. That's what it looked like. But also, that is the most shoddily... I know we're not a physics or electric podcast or electrician podcast, but that is the shoddiest wired room known to man. Because the minute the MRI turned on, sparks went off everywhere.
Wait, is that not what's supposed to happen in a hospital environment when you turn on the imaging equipment? Sparks everywhere is bad?
So
frowned
the thing
upon.
is, being in an MRI is really boring. And you need to make sure that people have something to look at. So, you hit the button, the sparks go off, they can be distracted momentarily. It's perfect.
I just had a CD player. That sounds so much better.
But there were so many sparks, and, like, he just ran, and then the villain just walked out.
Yeah, it was real sad that James Bond basically was going to do a James Bond villain soliloquy. He woke up the guy he was going to kill to tell him what? There's no point to that. I don't understand.
There was absolutely no reason to wake him up. And the other thing is, he ran out of there. I'm presuming he pulled out the IV at some point. There was no IV in him. I mean,
despite the fact that everything was being squeezed
Which
into
is
him
good
at a high
because
rate.
needles.
yeah, because if he did have an IV in him and he ran out, he would just leave a trail of blood behind him, and it'll be real easy to find him. Because James Bond went out, was like, I don't know where he went.
Also, the IV pole would have been pulled into the MRI.
Yep.
Yeah.
God, there's so many things. So wait, I did not even notice that he did not have an IV.
I mean, I'm only thinking back on it now, so I can't say certainly.
He had-
But no, he did. I mean,
He had the bag.
I mean, the bag is hanging, but that doesn't mean he has a needle in.
He also had leads on him, so those would have got pulled off his chest.
I mean, anything with any small amount of magnetizable metal would have definitely been pulled
So
there.
James Bond's belt buckle would have flown in.
Definitely his watch.
Yeah.
Like,
Ruined his sex life.
So many things. And it was really just the things that could have injured somebody.
Yeah.
Now, I'm guessing that if your watch gets pulled in, you also suddenly have some wrist issues.
Yes, that's
I'm
it's
not
true.
a-
You would have been stuck to the MRI.
Yeah. I'm not a wrist doctor, but I would say so.
Not a wristician?
No, I'm not a wristician.
I mean, I know we only looked at it briefly, but a few minutes later in the movie, they have a solution to wrist issues, which is to just laser it off.
Yeah.
If you can laser it off, then you can deal with the hand as a solitary body and do the things you need to do.
How many hands have been lost over the? This is going to be our 9th episode, and I think 4 hands have been amputated.
At least 2 in...
2 in Star
Two in
Wars.
Star Wars.
Frank, this
Oh,
one.
I forgot about Crank. Someone losing their hand.
I
I think that's 4. Yeah.
yeah.
This is...
Did Vader lose both of his hands?
Well, he lost one.
No, he lost.
early on.
He lost one early on. He lost one during the fight, and then he lost both his legs. So yeah.
Foreshadowing hand. I like.
Yep. The foreshadowing. Everyone loses hands in Star Wars.
Hey, I think over the course of Star Wars, Darth Vader loses 4 hands.
I'll buy it.
That's too. That is.
That's too many hands.
That's 4. To be fair, he lost 4 too many hands. The correct answer of hands to lose is 0.
You should lose.
You should lose.
You should lose
0.
as few hands as possible.
Yes. But yeah,
Is it time to ask the question?
probably.
How do we make Die Another... I can't do this with a straight face. How do we make Die Another Day more medically accurate? And how is it less medically accurate than Crank?
You know that
It is less medically accurate
That
than
is-
Crank.
There was actually a
ridiculous.
doctor in Crank who actually asked correct questions about a heart attack.
He was at least pretending to
Yeah.
try.
Yeah.
Like,
The other doctor of the DNA clinic just made up stuff out of his.
he was just trying to sleep with Halle Berry.
Yeah.
And I can't fault him for that.
But there was not. I'm trying to think back. The post-torture recovery, I mean, it's like every other resuscitation scene. There's better ways to do it and make it look more realistic. Stop shocking people who are dead. Is probably the biggest one.
That's a big deal.
I mean,
shocking doesn't bring you back from flatline.
And also probably give them some time to recover, because you don't recover that fast after being dead. There's no way.
Fighting after recovery from death is a really big deal. Like,
that's a big trope.
At least have the guy talk a little bit so the guy can start breathing again and then fight. Like, I'll believe that.
Yeah.
Give him a minute.
But this is also post-torture James Bond. So he's already weak, too. And he had the strength to fight off 2 orderlies and a nurse. So I think that was
post-torture, post-cardiac arrest.
Correct. So that's like a double whammy.
PTPA.
That's a double O whammy.
What about keeping the stakes high? What could you do instead of the old DNA switcheroo?
Face Off?
I mean, Face Off is actually a better solution. I mean, because if you're gonna, the premise of this movie is these guys seem like they die, but they have to be able to come back as people that nobody recognizes. So, like, just plastic surgery is fine. Like, that works pretty good. I think the recovery time, the skin color change is offensive for many reasons. But it is what it is. It's fine.
I would also think the recovery time from a face transplant would be slightly less than a bone marrow transplant. Both would require immunosuppressants, but at least you're not immunosuppressing your entire immune system.
That's true. A bone marrow transplant is a big deal where, like, people get suited up to come and visit you. Yeah. Like, you want to give them no germs. And so to have this guy, like, in a clinic where James Bond the doors were open. There weren't even sealed doors. Like, that's a crazy...
like, Kramer could have gone in there.
it was an old Cuban, like, but Spanish mission style base.
Yeah, but like, still, like, they still have medicine there, which is, this guy that is immunosuppressed needs to be sealed away from other people.
But of all places to put your super secret DNA whatevery.
That's pretty good.
That's a good hiding place.
Yeah. It's a good hiding place, but it's not a place you can sterilize.
No,
you can. It doesn't have to be sterile. You just have to not introduce nonsense. Yeah. And so having it so that the doors are open while he's getting immunosuppressant therapy, it doesn't make sense. No. Like, I can say it's fine that there's no security. It's fine that he can just walk in there, but to have the doors open to the hallway doesn't make sense.
What about the therapeutic effect of just a nice good breeze?
You know what? Laughter is the best
medicine.
We're doing Patch Adams later this year, probably.
I will not be here for that episode.
But, and then it kind of also brings up another point with just, why are you doing something that is supposed to be, like, searingly painful of a procedure for DNA therapy when you could just do a face transplant? It's probably easier. It doesn't seem as painful.
You're really selling yourself on this face transplant, which is a thing that doesn't exist. I mean, like, it exists,
does exist,
but also no.
Look, you're the one who brought up 2 movies now where people's faces get changed.
I mean, maybe I'm just into that kind of thing. That's not the point.
We're gonna do Freaky Friday at some point. Then
to make this movie more medically accurate, it's like if you're going to
transplant.
So you could change the premise of the movie where it's like nobody knows who this guy is, but we have his DNA profile, so we have to then maybe there's a case to be made for what they're doing. But changing your blood and people get bone marrow suppression and bone marrow transplants all the time for leukemia.
Their DNA is the exact same.
It does not change how they look. So that's the problem, is like this movie is postulating that changing your DNA... I can't believe I said postulating. Is changing your DNA is going to change the way your face looks. Yeah. Which is not...
Not just change your face, but change who you are.
No, it's not saying that. It's just saying it's going to change everything about your outward appearance.
Now, that should also affect your brain, to be honest.
They at no point did they bring up, at least that I caught, that so if you were going to be on immunosuppressants because you were having a DNA replacement therapy thing, would you first want to remove the chunks of diamond that are in your face?
I mean, given that explosion, presumably they were sterile.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like, if they weren't causing any issues,
I mean,
while you didn't have the therapy, they shouldn't suddenly
Would
start.
the bacteria would have been incinerated.
Would DNA replacement therapy also replace the diamonds in your face with like cubic zirconia?
Your face would be worth so much less.
Yeah.
Well,
Not worth
diamonds
it.
do have DNA.
From what I've heard from
Gross.
other Bond movies, diamonds are forever,
Oh God.
which is why they couldn't remove them.
Gross.
This just ended with a groan fest
I'm
all
leaving.
the way through.
I'm leaving.
This just ended with a serious, horrible groan fest.
All right.
That's the sparkling personalities all just shining everywhere.
So this has been the last episode. Much like Pierce Brosnan, we're ending on a low note.
Oh my God.
Thanks everybody for listening. We'll be back next Tuesday with more Hi Everybody and more bad medicine.
Thanks for listening.
Yeah, thanks folks. Bye.
Bye.